Welcome to The Way the World Works, where the trusted team behind the Tuttle Twins books tackles current events, hot topics, and fun ideas to help your family find clarity in a world full of confusion.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, Brittany.
So today I want to talk about kind of a controversial topic, and that is about Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladmir Putin and what that means. So just to kind of summarize what happened, there was a media or a political pundit is what you would call him, who used to host a news show, who got fired from the news show, and now he's doing a lot of independent media, but that's allowed him to not have to worry about bosses or angering, a mainstream media outlet. And so he did something very bold, and he went to Russia and he interviewed the president, Vladimir Putin, who is not a very great man. Obviously, I think we know that. In fact, most politicians are not great people. I think that's another thing that we need to remember. But people, especially on the left, but even a lot of people on the right, are losing their minds over this. And they're saying, how dare Tucker Carlson go talk to this, authoritarian leader who's bombing Ukraine? Why would he do this? He clearly is an evil man. He's anti-American. And it's weird to me that we've gone this way because, in my opinion, news and journalism, which is what Tucker Carlson does, should be
completely nonpartisan.
Yeah, completely nonpartisan. More, and I don't even want to say objective because it shouldn't even be beyond that. You should just be getting information. Mm-hmm. It should be on facts, not on opinion. And I don't know, did you watch it, Katie?
I saw clips of it. I did not watch the whole thing.
Some of it was kind of boring, so I don't blame you. It was 2 hours. I think I only made it an hour and a half in.
Yeah, there was a lot of monologuing, and I was like, okay.
A lot of monologuing and a lot about the history of Russia. And At first I was like, this is so boring. But I do actually kind of understand why Putin was doing that. I think he wanted to paint a picture because one thing America doesn't always, and I don't want to say America, I should say our government doesn't always understand, it's other countries' histories. One of the reasons during the Vietnam War that we got into so much trouble, other than being in a war we shouldn't have been in, was that we didn't understand the people of Vietnam. We did not understand their history. And so when we went in, it was actually a lot like Britain going into the United States or the American colonies during the Revolutionary War. And they didn't realize the guerrilla warfare and the passion of the colonists who were ready to protect their land. And in Vietnam, it was the same thing. There were people who were willing to protect their land. And so we didn't understand, and we lost that war. And I think the reason Putin was explaining all this Russian history was to show all the history that we as Americans don't know because we don't live it, right? It's not our history. And it was a really interesting interview. Putin definitely called out our foreign policy. And I think you and I, Katie, know that that's valid.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make it clear that I'm not pro Putin here. This is not, I'm not saying the Russian president is great, but like I said before, I don't think any politician is great.
It's interesting. We actually just had, so my husband was in the military for a long time and served multiple deployments in the Middle East. And so we have been in our homeschool kind of doing a unit on the Middle East, on Middle Eastern history right now. And one of the things that we just talked about with our kids the other night was how this exact same thing, and I think it can probably be said for every war, we went into Afghanistan under these pretenses, and we had most Americans had no idea what the complex history of the Taliban, of Osama bin Laden, of all of that even was. And then we went into Iraq, and it's the same thing. Americans did not understand the complex history between the Sunni and the Shia and all of their differences. And so it was we show up there and we're like, oh, tell us who the bad guy is. And this Sunni guy points to the Shia neighborhood and says, oh, they're the bad guys. They're the terrorists. And so we go and arrest people over there. And then at a different time, we would encounter, a Shia neighborhood or family. And they would say, oh, no, it's the Sunnis. They're the bad guys. They're the terrorists. And we were just fumbling around in Iraq for how long? Basically,
too long.
Yeah, in large part because we had no idea how complex their history was. I mean, it dated all the way back to when Muhammad was alive and the breaks that began to happen just right after his death. And so, we sometimes, people like us, take some flack from people who say oh, well, you're just isolationist, like you know, you don't care about other people in the world. And it's like, no, we just understand that their histories are so complex that it's very, very hard for a foreign person or a foreign army to come in and make the right calls.
And I think it was a good reminder because again, I have to keep saying this, like not pro Putin, but we get so caught up in that I think it was a good reminder that it isn't always about that there are things we don't understand. And there are things Putin doesn't understand. And there are things we don't understand, which is why it was so important for Tucker Carlson to go over there and ask questions
Hmm.
and to be a journalist. And I don't remember the last time, Katie, I watched like an interview and thought this is real journalism, aside from maybe when the Edward Snowden stuff happened
Hmm.
and you had Edward Snowden being interviewed, who coincidentally lives in Russia, which is kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Has to, not out of not out of want, but out of necessity. But it was a really interesting interview. It's also funny to me to hear people say that Tucker Carlson is just like a Putin fan, and that's why he went over there. That's not the case. In fact, he even called him out and said, "Why aren't you releasing this journalist that you've had imprisoned for years?" And, Putin said, "No, I'm not going to," but he asked these questions. And I think it was I more so than watching the interview, Katie, I was actually really excited to see the backlash because I knew it was
Hmm.
going to happen.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
surely within 5 minutes of the interview being published on Tucker's site, there were people writing articles about how Tucker is a terrible person. But I loved this because, as I said, Tucker Carlson had gotten fired from his job at Fox News, and that's why he was able to do this. It's because of this rise of independent media. And he
Hmm.
doesn't even put his videos on YouTube. He's got his
Hmm.
own website. So like YouTube can't take him down.
Well, and
Twitter,
did you
I think he's on Twitter too, or X, whatever it's called.
it was so funny because of course this was a huge deal. And so all of the news networks were covering it. And I don't know if you saw how sweet it must have been for Tucker when Fox News was running a story on it and they had to like credit Tucker's website for the video that they were using to cover this story after they had fired him. And then, he went and got this great story and uploaded it to his own network. So I thought that was pretty funny seeing Fox have to maybe eat crow a little bit there.
Yes, no, it's so funny, and it's almost jealousy, I feel like, on the part of other media outlets, because when you get into journalism, I imagine you kind of dream of being the journalist who gets to interview someone controversial, Like,
Mhm.
I remember a time when that was the big thing. You wanted to have these big controversial interviews because that was groundbreaking. That's what you do. Journalists sit
Mhm.
down with any person on any side of any argument, and they just try to get their point of view, and they try to get the facts. And somewhere down the line, we stopped doing that because
And
now
isn't it
everybody— oh, go on, please.
I was just gonna say, isn't it I mean, I guess horrifying is the word that comes to mind that we have so many people in a supposedly free country essentially just screaming and begging for censorship and only one side of a story. Like, that's what people were mad about. They were mad that they were being told um, the other side of a story. I mean, that's such a weird thing to be angry about, but that is what people were mad about. They didn't want to know the whole story. They didn't want to hear, the perspective from, what Vladimir Putin's why he was doing what he was and how he saw the war with Ukraine. Like, that's such a weird thing to me that people in a free society would be essentially begging for, chains to be put on their sources of information. That is so weird.
And why do we think that is? In my opinion, I think it's because people are scared. People don't trust people with information. They think if we have too much information, people are going to think the wrong way. And I'm saying wrong way in I can't even speak today.
I
Scare
could hear
quotes. That's
I
the
could
word.
hear them.
um, that people want you to think the way they think. Look at CNN during COVID and all the
Mhm.
misinformation they gave. They're scared that if you get other information and you believe it, you're going to ruin their narrative, and they're scared of that. And I don't think anyone watched that interview and came out saying like, I'm on Putin's side, let's go start a war with Ukraine. I don't think
Mhm.
anybody thought that. But I did think it was very interesting to even watch him talk candidly to an American journalist in that way. It was funny to see him talk more coherently than our president.
Right.
That was interesting. That was a weird juxtaposition to see, a comparison, if you will, to see that. I don't
Hmm.
think President Biden would have even been able to have that conversation
Right.
without steering off. But it was just interesting to see that we got a glimpse of something we would normally have not gotten. And that, to me, is what true journalism is. And I wondered, I actually had this small hope that he'd get some respect from other people. And what was interesting, and this is not like scientific data, but I saw a friend of mine on social media who's much, like, very far left on everything, say, like, this is really cool that Tucker Carlson did that, because it feels
Hmm.
like this is real journalism. And I was like, okay, that actually gives me hope, even though it's just one person, but that there are people that understand why this was a big deal.
Well, and I think that
Oh, go on.
go ahead.
No, I was done.
Okay. I think that is, uh, if we had to pinpoint who the Tuttle Twins audience is, it would be people like that. Like, it doesn't really matter if you identify as being on the left or on the right. A person who could hear that interview and say, finally, someone is doing real journalism. Like, those are the people who are likely to fall in love with what we do at the Tuttle Twins. Like, that's our audience. The people who are like, wait a minute, something's wrong, or, we're not being told the truth, or, telling the truth is important, even if you're saying something that I don't like. Like, that's that's who we need. And that is, I think, an emerging demographic. I think that since COVID especially, there are a lot of people who in the last several years have kind of felt like, they're maybe becoming politically homeless.
Hmm.
They know
More
something's
so than
wrong.
ever, I would say.
Yeah. And so I think that's such a cool opportunity for our messages, because they are messages that have led to, human peace and prosperity and flourishing. And I think that people are starting to really think like, maybe I need to start looking somewhere else, because if a journalist interviewing a president of a country is enough to make people scream and want him deplatformed, like, there's something wrong.
There's something wrong there. I think that's an excellent place to leave it. And I don't know. I don't even. It's not that I even think the interview would be inappropriate for kids. I think it would just be really, really boring. I
You
was
know.
excited for it, and I was really, really bored. So maybe parents, if you want to, watch it, and I'm sure you could find some good clips of the parts you watched, or use it to kind of spark a history lesson on the Russian history, which is actually quite fascinating. Russian history.
Mhm.
It's crazy, but we will leave it at that. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. And until next time, we will talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to The Way the World Works. Make sure your family is subscribed and check out TuttleTwins.com for more awesome content.